Hello everyone and welcome to Van Tech Corner. In today's video, we are going to install OpenWRT on the D-Link DIR-842, and it can be either hardware version 1, 2 or 3. So let me show you the router. So this is the router from Unify, which is a network provider in Malaysia. And if you take a look on the routers, you will see the hardware version of the router. So right here we have the hardware version C2 and the firmware version, which is 3.01 TM, which is stands for Telecom Malaysia. So we don't need to pay attention to it, but just the hardware version in order to select the correct firmware. In order to upload the OpenWRT firmware to the router, we will need to use the manufacturer recovery web page, which can be enabled by pressing the reset button while powering on the router. So for the hardware version 2, this is the reset button as you can see. And for the hardware version 1 and 2, the reset button may be the WPS button. So for hardware version 1 and 3, this may be your reset button. You need to check on that. And for the hardware version 2, this is the reset button. First of all, we have to turn off the router by press this power button, and is it already off? So let me press and hold the reset button at the back, alright? And then power on the router by this button, as you can see, this one. Alright, so let's do it. Press and hold the reset button while powering on the router, and you can only release the reset button until you see the LED blinking like that. Perfect. Now we can release the reset buttons. And once the LED of the power stated blink like this, we are now in the factory image recovery. So let's connect the router to the PC. So this is the cable from my computer, and I will now connect it to the router LAN port. So any of the port will be fine. Alright, so now let's back to the computer and we will continue the installation there. We're back to the PC, and this is the documentation for the D-Link DIR-842 C2. As I mentioned before, we have 3 versions. We have the C1, C2 and C3. And for different versions, we have different types of firmware. So as you can see, we have different download link. So we need both the factory.bin and the sysupgrade.bin, because first we need to install the factory.bin and then we need to install the system upgrade one more time once the router is up and running with OpenWRT. So right here, this is the installation guide, and we have completed some of the steps. So we have successfully go into the factory firmware installation page, and now we need to change the IP address of the routers. Of the network interface to 192.168.0.2. So let's open the network management page. Let's check the network connection adapters, and right here, this is the interface where the router is connected to. So right click and then go to Internet Protocol IPv4 and change it to 192.168.0.2, and you can skip the default gateway because we are in the same subnet anyway. And then let's try to ping the routers if it is up and running. So ping 192.168.0.1, and there is no response from the router. We don't need to ping because in the factory firmware recovery mode, the router will not answer to ping. So let's go ahead and open 192.168.0.1. We should see the emergency room update, and here we can select our firmware. So as I have mentioned, first of all, we will need the factory.bin and the sysupgrade.bin. And right here, this is the C2 version, which we need for the current model, and I have downloaded it here. So let me rename it to factory.bin to make it shorter, and sysupgrade.bin. So click the browse and select the factory.bin firmware like this and click upload. Updating file, don't power down and wait for 174 seconds. Let's back to the guide, and after the firmware successfully updated on the router, we don't power off the router, but we need to change our network adapter IP address to 192.168.1.2 and then run the below commands. As you have seen, the router has been flashed to the new firmware and it has just reboot. So right now the waiting time is 30 seconds and we should be ready with that. So let's wait for another 30 seconds to make sure everything is good. And right here, do not power off the router, but we need to change our network adapter to 192.168.1.2 in order to access the router. So I assume everything is good and ready now. So let's go to the network adapters and change it to 192.168.1.2 and hit OK and then OK. So right now we should be able to reach the router via 192.168.1.1 and yep, the router is responding. So it is up and running right now and the OpenWRT firmware is running. So let's try 192.168.1.1 and we cannot access LuCI because with the snapshot version, LuCI is not installed by default. So what we need to do? So now we need to run the below command to upload the sysupgrade.bin file to the router, and after that run a sysupgrade command to flash the new firmware, which is this firmware, to the routers, and after that we can use it as normal and then install LuCI. However, for some of you who are new to OpenWRT, this way is not easy at all. So I will do it on my way, on my own way, and which is easier. Alright, so now we are going to connect the one cable to the router. This is the one cable with internet connection, and I will plug it to the one port of the router, just right here as you can see. So right now the router should have a working internet connection. So yep, I will put it aside and back to the router, to LuCI. Alright, so I will establish the SSH connection to the router. And you can do it with command line or with PuTTY. So we have two options right here, which is PuTTY or the Windows command line. And let me try to SSH root at 192.168.1.1 and we see an error message saying that we have some certificates and something has been changed. This is because previously we have another router with the same IP address and now the system detects that it had been replaced with a new router. So we can surely go and delete this. So let me open the and then go to this one. I'm sorry, just go to this one. Alright, so it will be C users and then my username and this one. Yep, so this is the file and I can just delete it. And let's try to establish the SSH connection one more time. And yep, we are in, so press Z. And right here we're inside OpenWRT snapshot version. So first of all, let's try to ping 1.1.1 and see if the internet connection is good. Perfect. So it is up and running. So now we can set a password with this command, but we don't need it because we need to install the firmware anyway. So opkg update to update the packet database to install LuCI. Perfect. So the packet database had been updated, and let's install LuCI. So opkg install LuCI and hit enter. Perfect. So LuCI had been installed, and now we should be able to reach 192.168.1.1. And yep, here we are, OpenWRT running on the DIR-842 C2, and there is no password set, so we can go ahead and log in. So here we are, OpenWRT running on the DIR-842 C2. This is not the end. We will need to install the system upgrade firmware that we have mentioned previously. So let's go to System, Backup and Flash Firmware. And then click the Flash Image button to select the file. It should be the sysupgrade.bin firmware. So click Open and then Upload. So it will ask if we want to keep the setting, and since it is a new router, so we don't need to research any settings, so just click. It will take some time for sure, and now you can go and grab a cup of coffee and continue later. And you can actually check the router by ping 192.168.1.1-T. The router had back to online status, and for my case, it takes like 3 minutes to install the system upgrade firmware. And now the LuCI page will not be available again because for the snapshot version, there is no LuCI installed by default. Let's repeat the same step by disabling the SSH connection to the routers. And once again, we received the error message saying that the device has been changed. So let me go ahead and delete the file and then continue. And yes. And then now we can set a password for the router. So PASSWD and enter a password. So the WAN cable is still connected to the routers and the LAN cable is connected to my computer. So for now, we should have a working internet connection. So let's run opkg update to update the packet database and finally install LuCI to finish the installation. So for now, what we have just done is install LuCI, and after that, install this system upgrade firmware to the router using LuCI, using the web interface, and after that, we connect back to the router and install LuCI one more time. However, this way, the way that I am doing, it takes a little bit more time, but it is easier for beginner. So if you are an expert, you can surely follow this step to install the sysupgrade.bin file and don't need to care about what I'm saying for the second part. Alright, let's run the command one more time. OPKG install LuCI, and this will be the end of the step. So after this one is finished, we should have OpenWRT up and running on the DIR-842 C2. So now I can confidently disable my private internet connection and using the internet connection provided by the DIR-842 C2. So yep, the installation is in progress, and let's wait for it. The installation is finished and we should be able to reach LuCI via 192.168.1.1 and log in with the password we have set. So let's press Ctrl F5 to refresh the page, and we should be able to see our status page. So right here we have a lot of information going on, and this one I don't need to explain it anymore because you can check it out with my other tutorial. So let's back to the network interfaces and right click on it and then change it to obtain an IP address automatically and obtain DNS server address automatically as well. Hit OK. The router should request for a new IP address from the OpenWRT routers, and we can have, and we are having it right here. Alright, so let's go to System and Overview. So right here we can see the status, the kernel version, and the firmware, and the status of the memory, like the available memory. So we have totally 120 megabytes of the RAM. And we have the network status for the one connection and the DHCP leases as well. So now the very next thing you may need to do is go to the wireless section and then click the enable button to enable the two radio, which is the 2.4 and the 5 GHz. The 2.4, which is the 802.11 BGN, and the 802.11 NACE, the 5 GHz. So you can set a password for the router. For example, click the edit button and then so give it a name, something like 5G, and for the password give it a password for WPA2PSK, and then create a password. So for the rest we can leave it blank and click save, and basically the router should be, and by click the save and apply button, the 5 GHz Wi-Fi should be up and running with the SSID of OpenWRT-5G and with the password that I have set. So you can do the same for the 2.4 GHz by put something like 2.4G, and for the wireless security you can leave it open or set a password for it. And then for the channel, you can select a channel that you want or leave it for auto or the channel 11. So click save and apply. So basically that is we have set up OpenWRT on the DIR-842 C2 with the wireless. Once the device connected, we should be able to see the information right here. So let's go to status and the real-time graph, where we can see the real update of the routers. So the log, the traffic, and the connection. So BR-LAN stands for the LAN interface, and Ethernet 0.1 is the LAN interface, and Ethernet 0.2 will normally be our WAN interface. So you can check out my other OpenWRT tutorial by go to youtube.com and search for Van Tech Corner. And here we are, we have a lot of tutorial, and you can click on that link to get all of the playlists. So we have a very detailed guide on OpenWRT configuration, to the load balancing, to USB tethering, to PPPoE and VPN and stuff like that. So I hope you can find a lot of useful information on this page. I will also put the playlist link to the video description, so don't need to worry about that. So basically, that's all for today. I have shown you how to install OpenWRT on the DIR-842 C2 router. Please bear in mind that DIR-842 C2 still running the snapshot version, which means a new firmware can be released every 1 or 2 days. So sometimes if you are unable to install a certain software, a certain application or packages on this page, then most likely your firmware is outdated and you need to go back to the test data page of the router and get a new system upgrade file. So for example, you need to get this system upgrade file maybe in another 1 or 2 days, and then once you get it, go to system and software, the backup and flash firmware section, and update the new firmware to the router. So just that. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.